Carol Lim and Humberto Leon were 18 years old when they first met as undergraduates at the University of California, Berkeley in 1993. They hung out with a rip-stockinged, heavy eye-lined, chain-smoking, badass crew, MTV once said. There, in that fertile bed, one part intellectual, one part creative, and one part nerdy, Carol and Humberto established a friendship built on their shared love of fashion and retail. It was this quirky, fun point of view that would give rise to one of the coolest new global fashion concepts to emerge in the last decade. But first, Carol and Humberto took more conventional paths, leaving the bohemia of Berkeley for corporate roles at Deloitte Consulting and The Gap. Eventually, they both found themselves in New York, now working for Burberry and Bali, and meeting every week for lunch, dreaming of opening their own fashion boutique. In 2001, they took a trip to Hong Kong, which opened their eyes to the fun products and brands that could be found outside America. They thought that these might be appealing to people like them in the creative downtown scene of New York City. So the next year, with only $10,000 in savings and a line of credit, they launched Opening Ceremony, with brands they had brought in from Hong Kong as well as some of their own pieces. Within 1 month, everything had sold out. The duo were clearly onto something. They extended the idea of featuring exciting brands from one country around the world each year. Over the years, they have championed new talent, from Gareth Pugh to Proenza Schouler, and partnered with brands from Pendleton to Acme Studios, from Target to Topshop. Indeed, like their own partnership, the Opening Ceremony philosophy is built on collaborations, which enables them to create distinctive products and experiences for a global community of like-minded, creative, free-thinking people. Still, the fashion industry was caught by surprise when they were appointed co-creative directors of Kenzo in 2011. They were not trained as designers, but they have since brought the same kind of collaborative approach to their work at Kenzo, partnering with everyone from Spike Jonze to Chloe Sevigny and Jean-Paul Goude to communicate their designs, while injecting an undeniable energy into what was once a quite tired brand. These days, the duo splits their time between Paris and New York, overseeing Kenzo and Opening Ceremony, which now has stores in Los Angeles, London, and Tokyo, as well as an online store and their own OC label. Today, we're here to learn about this incredible journey built on collaborations and partnerships, and how it has enabled them to create the careers and lives of their dreams. Questions. So, thank you guys for joining us tonight.
Thank you for asking us.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing when you go back and think about how all of this started. And it really goes back to your time in college. So I wanted to start there where this amazing partnership began and just understand how you first met and how you built the foundations of a relationship that's continued for almost 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Carol and I went to Berkeley together, as a lot of people probably know, and we met really our freshman year as 18-year-olds, and it was actually through a mutual friend who's, I think, sitting in this audience. And yeah, I think that from that moment, what really happened is two people who shared similar interest in music, film, fashion, culture, and just really kind of an understanding of, I think, life as we kind of know it. So I think that bond kind of began there.
And I think there was I think Humberto was able to kind of push me in ways, and I was able to push him in different ways, and to experience new things that I think is still at the core of our relationship today.
So take us to the moment where you actually first met, because sometimes, I know from my own life, and I'm sure everyone here can relate to that, you meet someone and you kind of know. I mean, did you know that this was going to be a lifelong friendship and partnership, and what was that moment where you first met?
I mean, to paint it really kind of perfectly and honestly, I actually was brought over to Carol's house I was taking a painting class at the time, and my friend who I just met brought me over to her house. She had 3 roommates, one of which was Carol. Carol was at home tutoring, or no, so she was with her roommate, and who looked really young, and I thought she was tutoring somebody, and so she was with her roommate, and I was with my friend, and we were talking about school, and I happened to have a car, and I said, let's go to the city, let's go out, and she said, only if you can convince my roommates to go out. And the roommate was Carol, econ student, very unwilling to go out on a weeknight.
This was 10 p.m., mind you. He came over on a school night, and he's like, we're going to go out dancing in the city. And I was like, oh, it's too late. I'm in my pajamas. He's like, who cares? He's like, just throw some heels on, wear your pajamas. Oh. Exactly, that's what he said.
That was dramatic.
That's exactly what he said, and so I said, okay, I'll go out with you.
And I think that pushing has really resonated throughout our career and our lives, and just this really kind of contrasting idea where she pushes me and I push her, and so I think.
And it's also the environment, right? Because over the years, as I've met people from Berkeley, and actually, interestingly enough, Carol and I met in 1997. When we were before both of us were in the fashion industry. And over the years, as I've met people from Berkeley, and Carol was maybe one of the first people, there's always this like creative, nerdy, quirky streak in Berkeley people, which I'm always personally really drawn to. I mean, what do you think is about that setting? Because also, Laura and Kate from Rodarte were there at the same time. Patrick Ravel was there. Todd from the Selby was. I mean, it seems to kind of generate these really interesting, smart, creative people.
I mean, I think it was, and I think we can only speak about the time that we were there, but I feel like there was something there where you were exposed to a lot. I mean, it was at a time when the internet was just really kind of flourishing and becoming its thing, and I don't know, I feel like it was a great place where, people always say San Francisco is the kind of Europe of America, and in many ways it really kind of was an eye-opening place to be, where we understood, what we loved. Oh, well, something really.
Those Berkeley ghosts, man. Sorry about that, guys. One thing that you guys did, you've told me in the past, is that it was there that you kind of discovered your shared interest in fashion and retail. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little. I mean, can you each tell me a story about the other person? Or a story where this kind of activity of going out and kind of immersing yourself in the scene?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start. So I think, one of the things that we really enjoyed doing was going to discover either new places to eat. Also, at the time for us, vintage shopping or thrift store shopping was a lot different than it is today, because actually you could find a lot of brands, luxury brands. A lot of the times the pieces we collected early on were from our days shopping at Salvation Army. So we would have a routine every Saturday. We'd drive to Oakland, get our Chinese pastries in the car, have a snack, and we'd run into Salvation Army, and we had to be very strategic because it was us and then my roommate and his friend, and we all had very similar tastes, and we'd run through the aisles, and people would be like, oh, did you see what I got? And you'd be so jealous because you're like, oh my God, I love that. But you had to stick to your section first because you didn't want the other person to get stuff. But I think early on, actually, that's where I learned from Humberto appreciation for details. He would get things, and I'd be like, oh, are you gonna wear that? He's like, no, but I really like this idea of, this is a really interesting detail. And so there are things that he, I think, very early on taught me about things of discovering different techniques.
Carol is basically telling people I'm also a hoarder, and I was also looking in the women's section, looking at things, and I was just I think we both shared this love of shopping, and basically the way you would do this is you would go and you would pile up as many things that you could find. Everything was like $3 to $5, or $10, and you could find Chanel or Givenchy. You could find all these amazing brands. and this is back in the day, I don't know if this is still possible now, but so each person would have their pile, and you would almost try to manipulate the other person to not like what they are holding. And so they would say, like, what do you think? And you're like, I don't know, it doesn't look that great. And then the minute they put it down, you can basically take it back from them.
So it's amazing, because you had this like really clear shared interest in thrifting, retail, fashion, clothes, all of that stuff from the beginning. And the seeds were there, but when you graduated, you both took more kind of corporate paths, right? Carol, you went to Deloitte Consulting and then to Robertson Stevens. And Humberto, you were at Old Navy and the Gap.
Yeah.
So why were those the decisions you took at that stage?
I mean, when I graduated from Berkeley, I was already working for the Gap for about 8 years at this point. And I had graduated with an art degree with American Studies double, and I needed to pay off loans. I knew that I couldn't survive just going into art, and so I came from this really stable background of working in corporate fashion, and Old Navy was beginning at the time, and they offered me a job right when I graduated, and I felt like there was a way that I could really carve something out of the corporate fashion world that could be creative within what I was doing. And I eventually left as I was head of the creatives of the visual side. And so there was something really interesting that I was able to twist my love of fashion, my kind of love of art into a more kind of corporate lifestyle.
And I think for me, I wasn't sure necessarily what I wanted to do, and I knew that kind of doing consulting or finance were good stepping stones and good foundations to understand whatever it is I wanted to go into. And so for me, it was just a path to get to, I think, where we are today, which I didn't know at the time, but I learned a lot, and I always thought these are things that I could take with me, and how do I understand kind of the bigger picture of the way things work. So I mean, I think those decisions, shaped kind of our partnership and where we are today. So it's interesting, but.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, there's a lot of young people who've been sending questions through on Twitter today and over the past couple of days. And a lot of the questions are like, well, how did you break in? So tell me about, let's move to the next step, which is you both moved to New York, Bali, Burberry, corporate, but closer, I guess, to the heart of fashion. And then something makes you decide that actually you're going to quit these stable jobs and start your own business. How did that actually come about, and what gave you the confidence to take that kind of risk?
I mean, I think that for me especially, I felt like I had worked in the corporate field for a while. I had established a great relationship and a great know-how in working in the corporate world. And so I felt very secure that I could always go back to that. And I think that I knew I was good at my job, and I knew that I could always rely on that as a fallback plan. And I think that for us kind of gave us both that courage to really put our $5,000 together to start this thing that we dreamed up, that was this really kind of far reach idea of opening up a retail store.
Yeah, I think, we always said our path could be clear if we stayed in corporate fashion. We started here, you would kind of come to head up a division and you can move around. And I think we thought, is there a way that we can combine the things that we love, turn it into a job, and also make it into a business and do the things that we loved, and this idea of discovery. So we always knew, and we said, look, we're going to give it a year and a half, 2 years tops, and if it's not going to make money, we'll go back. But, let's try. And I think one of the things we've always said to each other is, if you don't feel slightly uncomfortable about it, then it's not worth doing. You're in a safe zone. And so we did it, and we definitely didn't feel comfortable about it.
How uncomfortable were you? Tell us about kind of what it felt like. Because, quitting a stable job, and you said you each put in $5,000, which is given what you've achieved today, it's an astoundingly small sum of money, plus a line of credit. So piece together like the months before opening the store, including the idea of coming up with the concept, because at the time it was kind of a new kind of concept, a high-low concept, this global point of view. How did you get there?
Yeah, I think, we would have our meetings, and we obviously had a plan that we had set out, and we said, these are the steps that we need to take. And, actually we had planned to open September 2001, and obviously September 11th happened. So we kind of reassessed and said, does this make sense? Do we want to open the business now? And actually more than ever, we thought it does make sense because, as people are still looking for this type of experience, we should create that and create it from an authentic point of view. And so we planned, and we worked with a small business unit and applied for a loan. And I think our naive approach actually of not having a set formula of this is what our retail model is going to be has been the, one of the factors of us being able to be very fluid in terms of how we merchandise the store, what kind of projects we want to do, because I think it's a very human approach that we take. As we change as people, as we have new interests, we like to bring that to the store and to the company.
And I think because there was only two of us, we had to play every role of almost, like a corporate fashion. So we would work on buying, and we would say, Carol and I were never planners or merchandisers or any of these jobs, but we had to really put on those hats and discipline ourselves and say, okay, well, if we were a planner, how do we chase after this business? Or if we're merchandising, is this balanced, and how does this look like in the store? What does this look like to the customer? So there was a lot of hats that we had to put on from early on. Mm-hmm. And for the first 2 years, it was really the two of us, really figuring everything out. So everything was based on logic and how would this work, and does this make sense? And
so there's like a process of testing and iteration and like figuring it out as you go along.
Yeah, and I think that there was two of us, so I think we had two different brains working, and we were each pushing ourselves further in one direction, and we would, really try to maximize the experience. I think that the fact that there were two of us coming from two very different fields really, I think, was to our advantage, and it really helped us take opening ceremony to where it is.
So the first year you do the Hong Kong theme, because you've gone on this trip to Hong Kong and you found these things. One of the things that you've told me in the past is that you thought that some of that stuff that you found would be interesting to the people you knew. Tell us a little bit about the customer that you had in mind, because if you're opening a retail store, clearly, and you're being logical about it, clearly you're thinking about who that person is that would walk in and kind of be interested in this stuff. Like, who are you targeting it at? Because you opened on Howard Street, which is kind of the middle of nowhere in Chinatown at that stage, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the target first and foremost was us, and then the second would be all our friends, and then we also looked at what was happening in New York at the time, and also what was unavailable as a New Yorker, and I think all those pieces really told what we were bringing into the store, because we were really, we love shopping, so we saw what was in the marketplace, and so everything came from a very personal point of view of what we felt was missing. And early on, we adopted this idea of how do we tell the story as a whole? How do we really kind of, as we're bringing in all these different people, designers and products, how do we come up with something that can really tell this overarching story? And I think the storytelling aspect has been something that we've never left. And I think till this day, every project, every collection, anything that we make or produce or buy comes from a very authentic story.
And I think that we've always wanted to give our customer, including ourselves, something new. I think, we've always said, we don't want to stay on something over and over and again and have the customer tell us, oh, you know what, we're not into this anymore. We want that journey to be like, what's the new thing that you're looking for? And I think especially now, even more so, it's a lot more relevant because of the internet and a lot more options that people have to shop. And so for us, it's how do we keep things new and interesting?
I think that's also a good example of experience that we took from our corporate jobs. You know, I did come from the Gap, and it was one of those things where there was the $1 million product, and they would wait until the customer would say they weren't interested anymore, and then all of a sudden the company would react and say, okay, let's do a massive markdown, and now it's not about that. And I think Carol and I instinctively said we never want the customer to tell us when something's not right. We want to be able to tell the customer this is what's right. Mm-hmm. And that was always our approach, is how do we always, how do we stay ahead of the game, and how do we stay ahead and really kind of aspire and be a brand that could be really aspirational.
It's interesting because one major constituency, of course, that you think about is the customer. But looking back over the years, and I read your amazing 10-year anniversary book and kind of went through it, the other thing that really struck me was the other constituency that's really played a big part in your story. And in a way, building on your own partnership, right? Because this has all started between this partnership that was founded at Berkeley, is the partnerships that you've created with brands. And one of my favorite stories from what I captured from that book was around Havianas, which, Havaiana flip-flops have kind of entered the fashion mainstream now. I mean, it's something that everyone kind of associates with Brazil. It's become a major exported brand. They've turned it into a huge lifestyle, but you guys discovered it in a supermarket. Do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of how, you were talking about always wanting something new and giving something, tell us about how, for example, that worked with Havianas.
Yeah, I mean, we went on some great trips to Brazil, and we were featuring Brazil as a country, and as we were looking at young designers and all these different things, Carol and I, instead of going out one night, we asked the hotel, is there a 24-hour place that we can shop? And they said, there's this supermarket out there. What was the name of it? Extra. And so we were like, they were like, take the car and go to this market, and they were like, make sure these people are safe, they're foreign. And so we went to this supermarket, and we have this cart, and we're throwing like these amazing Brazilian soaps and all these things. And then we come across this aisle of just flip-flops, and we're like, oh, these are the flip-flops that everyone wears around the street. And so we said, all right, should we buy some as souvenirs for our family? And so we said yes. We both came up to the counter with over like 70 pairs because everyone somehow needed a pair of these flip-flops. And so we were so excited. We went back to the hotel, and we're like, oh my God, how are we going to get through customs with this? What's going to happen? And we said, oh my God, we have to sell this at the store. Somehow we have to figure out. So we asked, somebody, we said, what's the contact for this company? And we found the Havianas contact, and they said, we don't export. And we said, we're going to help you export. We're going to figure this out for you. And so we were really one of the first stores or countries ever to import Havianas back then. And I remember Travel and Leisure coming in and saying, is there anything exciting that you found while you've been traveling? And we said Havianas, and somehow our sales associates were like, why are we having to try flip-flops on every customer? We're like, I don't know, just keep doing it. And we were selling over like 300 and then 500 pairs a week and 1,000, and it was really kind of almost getting out of control at some point.
And I mean, that's a good example of just, I think we went to the country, it was something that we felt was part of that experience, and we said, we know that our friends and our customers back home would appreciate this. It's a great product. It's really ubiquitous everywhere in Brazil, and really that's kind of our approach when we feature a country, is to really look to see what the young talent is, what established brands out there are, and kind of these other products that I think really are unique to each country.
And what's the staple of that country? And I think that when we did Germany, we discovered this underwear brand called Sheezer, and then when we did London, we brought Topshop, for the first time out of a Topshop environment and introduced it in the US. And, I think through the years, we've always kind of looked at what is something that is exciting and what really tells the story of that country.
So which countries are next?
What we're currently doing, we're finishing up this year of Belgium, and we've been really excited to really kind of bring attention back to Belgium, as because Antwerp and Belgium in general is one of the fashion cities that is birth to all these kind of amazing designs. So we've been able to really come back and look to all these young designers that are coming out of there, as well as work with a lot of the established and coming up with a really special product for that. So we're ending this September will be the end of the Belgium year, but as everyone knows, we always continue with the brands that do well and that we're excited about, and they always kind of make it as part of the home team. And then in September, we're going to focus and do a big kind of focus on Russia.
Great.
Yeah.
This is the first time we're announcing it, so
There's
you
a little
heard it
scoop.
here first.
So Russia's kind of front of mind right now. I mean, it's Fashion Week, so it's a little bit hard to concentrate on anything else. But there is the Winter Olympics happening in Sochi, in case anyone missed it. I mean, it's in a way it's a natural choice opening ceremony and it matches the Olympics, but in a way it's also a controversial choice because a lot of the controversy around gay rights and a lot of the things that have been happening around this particular Olympics have created, some backlash.
Yeah.
What do you guys think you can help bring to that dialogue?
I mean, I think that it was a really conscious decision as we talked about this, and I think that the whole gay rights issue was really front and center when we were really kind of thinking about the countries, and we felt like, is there a way that we can bring light to this and really focus on the arts, whether it's, through fashion and art and photography and culture, and really highlighting this and really kind of giving a really kind of positive spin to how do we bring light to this country that seems to be so strict about these issues that mean a lot to us personally. So I think every country that we've picked has never just been just loosely off of, they've always been because of a reason. I think we picked Germany at the time because there was a huge art movement happening in Berlin. And, we picked Sweden at the time because, we had discovered all these kind of Swedish brands that we thought this is a great place to really kind of focus. So for us, Russia, on top of, the fact that there's a lot of great young fashion talent coming out of there that we're focusing on, there's also this political atmosphere and how do we bring light and talk about these things. And I think that we've always wanted opening ceremonies to be this platform to really kind of bring things, onto the table and really kind of talk about things.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that the other thing that is really amazing about opening ceremony is it's kind of this community. You get this sense that, it started with the two of you and some of your friends, but as you've traveled around the world, as you've kind of explored and trawled the markets of Hong Kong and Sao Paulo and wherever, you're kind of really also finding like-minded individuals in those places and kind of creating this global connected group of people, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the important thing, is that we are opening a dialogue, and I think especially for Russia it will be interesting for us to bring light to that and bring attention, because there are creative things happening there and we want to be able to support those people and to bring attention to something that is personal to us. So it is, our community is growing and it's a way for us to collaborate and to support people in different countries.
And I think when we talk about our community, there's a lot of great fun people that are like movie directors and people that are associated with us, and actresses and actors, but there's also, I think on the flip side, we love that we have this platform. I think opening ceremony is a great platform that celebrates fashion and celebrates, fun cultural aspects, and along with that, there's also the matters that are bigger issues. I think, one example could be, even at Kenzo when we focused on working with the Blue Marine Foundation and really talking about this issue of overfishing and how it's affecting the world. And I think we're excited that we have this platform that can, yes, talk about the fun of fashion and the excitement of fashion and all the great kind of, excitement that you get out of that, but that on the flip side, there's all these other things that are happening that we should really kind of talk about and address.
The other platform that you've built is a platform for brands that kind of had fallen off the kind of mainstream. And one of my favorite ones, and the images that I found striking that we put in the video, was Pendleton, which is like, you've also been able to sniff out things that are in your own backyard that have this kind of great heritage and history. And it strikes me that in a way, in the same way that you brought Havianas into the kind of fashion mainstream from Brazil to America, you're also helping to elevate and kind of put a spotlight on brands that kind of people had forgotten about.
I think we've always talked about authenticity, and I think that a lot of, these brands that have, I think relevance in what inspires. I think in many ways these brands are so authentic and they come from such a real place. Pendleton is a good example. It's a brand that focused on lumberjacks and supplying Oregon, and that's where it began. And that story told the story of a flannel shirt. And I think as we're thinking about flannel shirts and we said, we want to design a flannel shirt for opening ceremony, we look to, you think about the 90s, you think about Kurt Cobain, you think about the Beach Boys and all these different things of people that wore flannels, and then you go back and you tell the story of how a flannel shirt began. And I think that, a lot of the projects of collaborating and partnerships that we've looked into tell a story of authenticity. And I feel like, as we talked about earlier, that the story part is so important to us, and how do we tell an authentic story? I think that Kenzo is a really good example of Carol and I really going back into the history of the brand and telling it through our eyes and our voice, but not forgetting where this brand began.
Where do you get your ideas from? Because so last night, for those of you who were at the opening ceremony show, there was a wall of chocolate, apparently 4 tons of chocolate dripping down a fingerprint that had been kind of enlarged on a massive white screen. Previously we've seen, circles of fruit. We've seen big car rallies. I mean, one of the questions we got from Twitter, there's a question from Catherine in San Francisco. She said, what's your creative process and how do you balance that creativity with commerce? So, I mean, how do you come up with these kind of larger than life ideas?
It's interesting because I think that we didn't do fashion shows before Kenzo. And I think that we didn't do advertising before Kenzo. And so I think starting with Kenzo, which is where we started our first kind of fashion shows, we said to ourselves, what can we do that would be exciting to people who've attended a lot of fashion shows? And I think before this, Carol and I would go to a lot of fashion shows and do the circuit of Fashion Week. And we said, how do we bring an element of excitement, an element of intimacy, an element of conversation, and how do we create this atmosphere that you really sense the clothing and a sense of the entire story of what we're trying to tell? And I think we come to it like the way we started opening ceremony, with such a kind of a fresh palette and not feeling like we have to do things the way that the industry does things. And it's, I think, given us, a great way of working. And we really only know how to work this way, which is we have an advertising campaign. What do we want to do that is exciting to us that would make this different than what's out there? And so I think we try to approach everything in that way, which is, in many ways what a lot of people get to see is a glimpse of this conversation between two people. And it's a very intimate and a personal aspect, but that's really kind of the outcome. This chocolate that you're talking about that people got to see last night is literally a personal conversation between Carol and I, and it was, us being really nerdy and saying, okay, what if we had chocolate dripping from the wall? And a lot of it is, how do we excite ourselves?
And I think for the creativity and commerce balance, I think when we do the collection and we have the show, because all of that is part of the storytelling, for us, we always think the clothes will be for sale and we can't wait for it to be on the rack, and it's a reality. We don't create or do shows for just a messaging. I think for us it's very important that the clothing that you see at the show is something that not only you can buy, but that will be in the store and will be attainable. I think that for us is the most interesting part of it, because I think it wouldn't be interesting for us to create an experience and just say, oh, okay, well, actually, more than half of this won't be produced, and you really
That's
can't
like
get
a
it.
slightly different approach from a lot of designers, right? Because you hear this thing in the industry like runway pieces, right? Which they get picked up for editorial and they get picked up for, you know, windows, but they don't ever get produced. In a way, you're taking the real kind of out of the box creativity. You're not putting it on the clothes, putting on the experience.
Yeah, I think it goes all together. I think
Yeah.
the clothes for us is the starting point, and there's always a storytelling behind the inspiration of the collection. But then we like to think, what else can complement the storytelling of the collection? So it all comes together as a package.
And I think that we always approach design with still aspiration and fantasy, but I think for us, it's important that the fantasy is reachable, that it's not something that is so far away that it's this unicorn that you can't touch. We want it to be something that's exciting and inspiring, and that you get excited when you see it, but that you can actually say, wow, I can actually go into the store and buy that, and that's cool.
Well, the perfect example of that is we did a piece on the website last year, which was one of the most read pieces of the whole year, which was the rise of the fashion sweatshirt. And I kind of remember growing up in the 90s with, I grew up in Canada, so everyone was crazy about Club Monaco sweatshirts. But when I started seeing these fashion sweatshirts emerge, and I think Kenzo was definitely one of the brands that was at the forefront of this movement, thinking about a product that has a lot of that energy and emotion and excitement in it that's attainable. So I'm curious, like, let's focus a bit on the Kenzo experience, because as you say, prior to Kenzo, you hadn't done shows before. You hadn't necessarily designed full collections and done like big advertising campaigns for them. Walking into a French atelier as two kind of downtown New York people must have been kind of a culture shock.
Probably not for us. I think we were really comfortable with it. We were excited about it, and I think that we approached it in a very, probably an American way, but I think with respect to the fact that we were entering a classic French house and a classic French atelier, and and I think that we really loved and respected, number one, the brand and the process of making the clothes so much. And there were elements like the sweatshirt that we said, oh, we want to make this, and it was one of those categories that wasn't available at the time, and it was exciting for us to really kind of inject in this French house and still remembering the beauty of having this atelier and making exciting clothing, that we can really kind of take a look at all the different aspects of the wardrobe. I think Carol and I always think about occasions, and that's something that we've always talked about through opening ceremony and Kenzo, is how do we think about this entirety of what clothing and a wardrobe means. And so for us, growing up in California, a sweatshirt is, as anybody I'm sure who lives in California, you just have it in your car, and it's one of those things it's a safety blanket. You just have it and you wear it, and you can wear it more than once in a week. You can wear it 3 days in a week and no one judges you. And it's that ease of that. And I think that I think there is something interesting about injecting that into the Kenzo brand that made it feel, I don't know, interesting. And I think for us, it was exciting for us to create something, as suburban kids that grew up and could look at luxury brands from afar, that we could create something that could, almost be kind of your entryway into a brand. And I think that was really the aspect that we approached it.
Well, judging by the number of Kenzo sweatshirts I've seen literally all over the world, you did a pretty amazing job at that. I was also wondering, you come from a fashion retail background now, before Kenzo. How, and for Kenzo and for any kind of major fashion house, hiring two retailers effectively, not designers, was a dramatic shift in strategy. And I'm wondering, how did your background in retail impact the way you approach the Kenzo project?
You know, I think it's interesting is, I think probably a lot of people know us as fashion retailers, but what's interesting is we've had our own brand since the beginning, and I think that different people know us in different ways, because oftentimes some people discover us through the brand in other parts of the world where we don't have a store. And so our approach has been pretty holistic from the beginning, because we had our line and we had a showroom, we have a showroom, and we have our stores. And so we've always had to think in kind of the full cycle. You know, we never say, okay, well, this piece is ours and the rest of it doesn't kind of pertain to us. So I think the Kenzo project was really interesting because all those pieces were in play. And actually even, you know, you look at the history of when Kenzo Takata came to Paris, he opened a store. There were a lot of similarities in kind of the approach in terms of all the things he thought about. So if you actually kind of digged a little deeper to kind of look at our backgrounds, I think there were a lot of things that resonated in terms of the way we approach opening ceremony to, you know, what our approach is at Kenzo.
And I think, you know, for us as creative directors, I think designing the clothes and designing what the collection would be is really just a fraction of what we're doing, because on top of that, we're challenging what the digital experience is and completely changing what that could look like. We're looking at the retail and really analyzing, you know, where are our stores and how should it look and what's the customer experience, and for advertising, what does that look like? And I think Carol and I are so involved in everything, including what the pricing is like and what the merchandising is like and what's the basics that can go with those fun fashion pieces. And I think we're as excited about what comes out on the runway as we are about what the commercial pieces are and what the basic dress shirt. And so every aspect we really challenge. And I think that in many ways, I feel like because at opening ceremony we have to think about everything, we've only come into Kenzo and approached the project in the same way.
That probably makes a huge difference, though, because so many of the designers that I meet are completely divorced or separated from the commercial side. I mean, sometimes, obviously the name of my website is The Business of Fashion, so I'm very interested in the commercial side, but a lot of more of the old school designers are kind of like that. So I think that's kind of a very new approach to be saying, you know, the creativity is really important, but so is the commercial success.
It's really exciting. I mean, I think that after the show, Carol and I are in the commercial showroom, you know, meeting with all the buyers and really kind of talking to them about what they're buying, what they're excited about, and you know, and I think that for us, really kind of seeing things through. I think that at opening ceremony, we have the excitement of being able to see things through, and I think Carol and I are always trying to be a part of the entire process, down to the customer buying it and seeing them on the street. To us, that's the most exciting, that's the most rewarding, is in a cab and we're driving and we're saying, oh my God, that person's wearing that opening ceremony thing or that Kenzo thing, and we're bringing out our phones and taking photos, and these people think we're crazy, and we love, I mean, that's the most exciting part for us, and till this day, it still is super exciting.
Totally. Let's talk about the future a bit.
Okay.
I don't want to only talk about the past. Last month, you guys made quite a big announcement about your next another big collaboration, and this time it's with Intel. You know, the fashion industry and the technology industry have often let's just say they've sat apart. And you know, we have the rise of this new category called wearable technology, and there's the Up Band and the Fuel Band and the Fitbit and all sorts of other devices that have come onto the market. And many people would argue that, you know, although that there's some design thinking in some of these objects, that they're not fashionable. So, you know, I'm wondering, kind of, as you think about this new device that you're working on with Intel, I understand it's a bracelet of some sort. You know, what is your thought process around what fashion can bring to this category of wearable technology?
Yeah, I think for us, what's great, I think when we met with Intel, you know, they really said, we understand technology, obviously, and we're the experts in that, but we really want to create an item that is not only covetable, but that people will want to wear every day. How does it become the necessity of, like the watch you wear every day? And so for us, it's an exciting challenge because we like to create product that is, something that you would want to wear every day. And so I think we haven't seen that happen before where, normally it happens all within one company. And so for us, what's great is we get to think both on the aesthetic level and also on a functionality level, how do we create a device that not only you need, but you want to wear?
Right, and if you look at, I think, the top performing wearable devices, they have a specific functional purpose. The ones that don't seem to be gaining any traction are the ones that are trying to do a whole bunch of things. So as you think about the functionality, are there kind of hints you can give us about where you're going? Because there's already things that will measure the number of steps you take or the amount of fuel you generate.
I mean, I think we want to make something that you'd want to wear on a daily basis, and that it is very useful and functional and practical in use, and something that you would want to wear every day, and that you're not sick of, and that's something that can live with you on a day-to-day basis.
We're going through right now, the really fun part is, even as ourselves as tech users of different devices, we always think, what are the features and things that are necessary, and how do we incorporate what's going to be exactly the point of view of this device? And so we can't reveal anything specific yet, but we're working towards exactly that. And I think we always use ourselves as examples of users of technology. What is it that this is going to provide that will be a necessity to someone?
And our community, I think that we've really kind of reached out and kind of gauged some feelers about, like, what are things that people really want.
Okay, well, stay tuned. Later this year, I understand.
Yes.
The launch. With people like you, I imagine there's also some other partnerships, collaborations, things coming up. Do you want to shed any light on any of those?
Yeah, I think another one that we're really excited, there's a few in the pipeline, but one that we want to talk about today is we're partnering with the Magritte Foundation to do a collection, which is very exciting. They haven't partnered with a fashion brand before. So again, this is just another example of being able to work in other areas of culture that I think are very interesting for us. And so you want to talk about kind of the pieces?
So it's exciting. We're doing a...
Do you want to first tell everyone about Magritte, just so that not everyone might know? So,
Magritte just had a huge exhibition, a retrospective at the MoMA, and is one of our absolute kind of favorite kind of surrealist artists, and it was really exciting to talk to the foundation and come up with something that is really kind of all-encompassing, both men's and women's, a really kind of tight capsule collection that really kind of speaks to the partnership between both Magritte and Opening Ceremony. We will be working along with that with, kind of 3 footwear brands that are all kind of incredible in their own aspect, ranging from Manolo to Birkenstocks to Vans. So it really kind of showcases the different kind of footwear.
so Manolo, Birkenstock, and Vans meets Magritte meets Opening Ceremony.
It was, we really kind of wanted to think about this triptych of footwear that you can really kind of think about different types of people. And I think that it's exciting to kind of see how this whole thing can kind of come together. We've seen all the samples and they're super
They're beautiful.
exciting. Everyone in the office wants it, so it's a good sign.
We're running out of time.
Okay.
So it comes to my favorite part of the conversation, and one that is really meaningful for a lot of the young people who look up to you guys and who were at the Gap now or at Deloitte now or some other corporate job and are looking for ways of breaking into the industry. I mean, the first question is really, along this journey, what's been the most difficult bit, and how did you guys get through it? Because certainly, I mean, the story in the press will always be about everything that went well, right?
Yes.
But there must have been times when things were challenging and tough.
Yeah, I think, more than anything, looking back, it's a challenge, but I think also part of what shaped us to where we are today is that I think we look back at certain missed opportunities. If we had more resources, we think, oh, if back then, if we had this, we could have done that. Yet, I don't think we harp on anything like that, because those decisions and things we may have not been able to capture at a certain time, I think, drive us to make other decisions to where we are today. And so I think, there's definitely struggles in a small business that are just two people. I mean, could we have a bigger office space? Yes, I think there's a lot of those types of challenges, but I think because we're resourceful and, like the story began, we started with $5,000 each. I think we always figure out ways of how do we make this work? How do we not forego that experience?
But what was the most difficult moment? I'm not going to let you get away with that very diplomatic but vague response. I mean, there must have been, every entrepreneur has they have tough moments. I mean, I've had them myself. It's hard.
I would say one of our toughest moments is when we were opening up Los Angeles. We had signed the lease on the space, and we were really excited about it. Carol and I have impeccable credit, and we actually are in competition all the time of who has better credit. And we're checking but you can't check it that much because it ruins your credit. But we've always, so we have incredible credit, and we went to the bank to get a loan for the LA store and to buy inventory and everything. And we were asking for a very, a conservative amount. It wasn't even that crazy. And we were completely denied. And because the banks couldn't see how this business could have grown the way it did. They didn't believe that we were able to double the businesses in that short period of time. It was, I think, about 3 or 4 years at the time.
Yeah.
So we signed a lease to a space and had no money to buy inventory. And so Carol and I had to really rethink how we were going to open up this LA space. We couldn't get out of our lease. We ended up remodeling 100% by ourselves, and we ended up buying only enough merchandise to fill the first floor, and then we ended up having a second store expansion a year later, which, I think in the end, it really it taught us great lessons in how we can approach things. And I think we're very pragmatic, and we're very much about problem solving, and we're not afraid to get our hands dirty. Carol and I do not come from money, and that is something that I think we've been very open about. We don't come from rich families. We come from a very, suburban lifestyle, kids that grew up just working at the mall, and this thing that we have was a dream. That is exciting to see it kind of come into play, and see where it is today is exciting for us.
Well, it's certainly been really exciting for all of us to watch it happen, especially, since I knew Carol from the old days. My last question before I turn it over to the audience is just for some advice. So, picture yourselves back at the age of 18 at Berkeley, because there's students like that at universities all over the world who have a much bigger window now into the fashion industry than we ever had at that age, right? I mean, it's everywhere. It's playing out on the internet. It's pretty much everywhere you look. To those young people who want to break in, what's your one best piece of advice, each of you, on what it takes to break into this industry and be successful?
I guess my advice would be have a very authentic point of view and come into this really from your guts and do what you love.
I would say make yourself indispensable. Even I remember we talk about this all the time from when we were interns, make yourself indispensable so that wherever you work, that you're curious, that that they just can't get rid of you. And be curious about the whole process, because the more you know about everything, I think it just makes you a better person in terms of your next job.
Okay. And I think be humble. I feel like that's something that I feel like is really important, and don't get ahead of yourself, because I feel like that is a very easy thing to get into.
Right. Especially when success comes fast and quickly, it can be easy to let it take you away into
Yeah.
the clouds.
And who cares about success? I think it's more important about what to work on. That's the most important part.
Okay. So we have time for a couple of questions from the audience, and also I'm going to scan our Twitter account to see if any more questions have come through on Twitter. If you have a question, please keep it brief and to the point, so we have time for lots of questions. I will point at you if we have some microphones available, and raise your hand high so I can see you. I saw one question over here on the left. And if you could please stand and introduce yourself, that would be great. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Hannah, and I work in, I used to be a fashion journalist, and I work more in kind of content generation, and I'm really interested in your collaboration with Intel, and I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about how you got involved, and if you think that wearable technology is kind of something cool and a trend, or if it's something that's going to have a real impact on the industry.
I think the conversation started with, they approached us and they talked to us about a project that they wanted to work on, and they said, we want to start early with you in the concepting phase. And for us, it felt really exciting, because I think where it's not successful for us or for these types of partnerships, when decisions are already made. And so I think for us, it was the right moment to partner with someone, because it's a very collaborative and open process. And I think they're very much into understanding our feedback into what will make this a successful device.
And it speaks to us. I feel like, opening ceremony is very much about looking into digital. I feel like it's definitely within our world, and we think about this stuff all the time. So it's only natural that we really kind of question all these different things. And I think that if the right wearable technology is in the market, yes, for sure, it's meant to penetrate the market. I feel like it's waiting to happen.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge opportunity. Already, you look at technology and the amount of gadgets that people use, it makes sense that that's the next step. It just has to be one that people want to wear.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, there's one right here. Any other questions? If you have a question, raise your hand. And the next one is on the left over there.
Hi, Ani. I wanted to ask you guys about your time managerial skills, because obviously you don't seem like you say no to a lot of great opportunities. So where does the day end, and where's the line where you guys say, okay, we can't take this project?
I think that Carol and I are very practical people, and we do a lot, but we're also not the type of people who's in the office at 2 a.m. going crazy. And I think that we definitely like a balance between life and work, and really what we experience in life really inspires what we do in work, as you can see. So I think that we try to be very good at managing things on an earlier level and try to be ahead of the game, and also not try to question things that we're working on. We try to, question it in the sense that, yes, we want to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing, but at the same time, we're not changing our minds every other second before a show and trying to change directions, or, we feel like we're, it's in a process. Everything is everything's a work in progress, and we're excited that people get to kind of experience that time period of what we're working on.
I also think because there's two of us, that it makes it easier to tackle multiple projects. And I know if I initiate a project, I know exactly the pieces I ask Humberto. And sometimes projects that obviously have a lot of, impact can often take 5 minutes for me to understand the pieces that Humberto would question. We run it by each other. So I think we're very organized, and vice versa. He'll start something, he's like, I'm passing this off to you, address these things. I know because we've known each other for 20 years, we know exactly what the other would question. And I think it's easy for us to be able to handle multiple projects that way, because we kind of pass the baton right at that right moment and just finish it. So it's great. I mean, we can communicate in an hour and probably get through 12 projects just by already eliminating all the questions I know he would ask if he were sitting in that meeting, and vice versa.
Having a partner is definitely a big advice that I would tell people. Having two is definitely better than one. In our
And
situation.
one last question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm also a writer. I guess I wanted to know if anything you guys have disproven that conventional idea that you need to master, design and technique and, go to like Central St. Martin's or Parsons to become successful and to build a brand. So do you feel like the future of fashion is knowing or having that experience in sales and retail and background like a brand, for example, in New York, Baja East, to build something and to build collections that will sell or are commercially viable and creative? Or is there, are you a emerging designer that doesn't even know how to make a business card, or is there room for both?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I think, as everyone knows, we didn't go to school for fashion. Carol and I come from very practical backgrounds. My mom was a sewer, and I learned to sew and make patterns from sight from her. And so we've approached, I think, fashion probably a little bit different than somebody who's gone through the academia of studying how to design fashion. And in many ways, I feel like it's really allowed us to think out of the box of how to work, with an atelier, or how to approach design and how to approach. We've always worked in logic and how do we deal with, how do we make this, or how do we make this come alive? And so I think it's allowed us a different way of working.
I do think you need to be aware. Having said that, not having that formal background, we've seen what it is. We know what fits are like. We know what quality is. We know what people look for. We look for that too. And so I think you do need to be aware of, whatever field that you're going to do. You don't have to have necessarily that formal training, but you have to have an eye and an understanding of what people are looking for and be able to provide that with a point of view.
Thanks, guys. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but that was a really interesting conversation. I just wanted to give out a few thank yous, because of course these events are not a single person involved. There's lots of people who've helped. First of all, I wanted to thank the team here at NeueHouse. I'm sure you'll all agree, as soon as I walked into this space, I wanted to come back. So I hope we can come back again, because I think it's just a wonderful space. To the teams at opening ceremony in Black Frame, who very efficiently helped us to pull together the video and help organize everything on the ground here in New York, thank you. Yes, please applaud. And there's a bunch of invisible people to you, but my team are all awake. It's past midnight in London, and they're managing the technology and the social media, and they've been, trying to organize everything from London to here. So I just wanted to wave to the BOF team in London and thank them. And thanks to all of you for coming out and joining us. Thanks for tuning in. And most of all, I really just want to say, thank you to Carol and Humberto for sharing their inspiring story and partnership with us. They say that the best partnerships are the ones where two people come together and create something that they couldn't have done on their own, right? And I think this is really the perfect example of two people bringing two different elements and creating something really unique, and then taking that same partnership model and applying it to hundreds of brands and designers and partners around the world. And I really just want to congratulate you, because I think it's really exciting and it's a great example for everyone to follow. So thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.